Hi, good morning. I'd like to thank all our viewers for joining us today. My name is Toby, and I'll be going through the threat insights of the second quarter of 2022. And so, where do we begin with the threat landscape of this year? Namely, we've been discovering an increased engagements of advanced persistent threats, or APTs, worldwide. And although this is very much correlated with the current existing Russian-Ukraine war that has been happening since February of this year, we are also experiencing a large number of activity outside of Eastern Europe, which is not just limited to the conflict. In fact, it is likely that APTs, both in common states such as China, the United States, as well as other countries, are also using this conflict to leverage their own abilities to conduct cyber espionage. And this normally comes in the focus of enumerating and performing reconnaissance on the capabilities of managed service providers, as well as exploring supply chain attacks very similar to that which was experienced last year as a result of the SolarWinds cyber attack. We're also seeing a 13% increase in ransomware, which is a rise this year, far greater than the past 5 years combined. And along with follow-up Log4j attacks on vulnerable servers that still continue to be exploitable on the public internet, even past December of last year, when the vulnerability was first discovered. And so an increasing narrative along with this is the state of cyber warfare, which the term is being extensively used as of this year and continues to evolve as the days go by. And though this topic is not new, the extensive effects of cyber warfare are now flowing into the commercial and civilian aspects, and therefore prompts a different kind of discussion that needs to involve both website owners as well as business owners that are not directly involved in the conflict. Along with this, we are seeing an upsurge as well as in terms of activism and activist culture. And this is, again, for our viewers who are not so sure, activism involves a combination of both activism mixed with technical skills, which results in the form of decentralized groups that can coordinate attacks for both political, social, and religious reasons. Threat actors like Anonymous come to mind, along with who are publicly announcing their operations and their agendas against the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And although there are some that are very much pro-Ukraine, there are also actors on both sides of the conflict, such as the pro-Russia group Killnet and the Conti ransomware group. Along with this, we also have telecom sectors that are being targeted. And this is very much a change from last year, where education and research held the top place in terms of the most targeted sectors for cyber attacks across the board. Having said that, there's now been a change of focus where the telecom sectors and ISPs are among the highest sectors that are now under attack, followed by government and military and communications sectors as well. And so this very much represents why targets of impact are much more effective when ISPs and the telco industries are being subjected to cyber attacks, given their wider reaching impacts. Along with this, we cannot discuss cyber warfare without the current conflict that is happening in Russia-Ukraine. And so as of recently, a number of companies such as Microsoft have published research showing a strong correlation between cyber attacks and military operations on the ground. And though this has been initially suspected for a long time, we now have actual credible evidence as a result of the prolonged conflict that such occurrences that cyber attacks often precede the actual ground operations as a form of disruption, as well as a form of gathering battlefield intelligence for the ground troops as well. And these strategic attacks have wide-ranging effects far beyond the military context. For example, the initial ground invasion by Russia was preceded by an attack on the satellite internet that was offered in Ukraine by Viasat. And this actually, this is an issue that still is not fully resolved. And while the Ukrainian military was heavily reliant on satellite communications, this disruption actually affected tens of thousands of internet service users across Europe. And to put that into context, the German energy sector was also affected because German wind turbines, around 5,800 wind turbines which were reliant on this satellite internet for remote access, was actually disrupted, and as a result, there was also permanent damage to routers, which needed to be replaced by the ISP provider. So, of course, again, the issue of Russian APT activity comes back into the fold, where a heavy amount of APT cyber attacks are disrupting on Ukrainian institutes and infrastructure. Well-known actors like Sandworm, for example, which have been known for attacking the Ukrainian power grids back in 2015 and 2016, as well as the spread of Petya and NotPetya ransomware in 2017, have come back into the spotlight, partly because of their successful attacks before, as well as their expected continued involvement in this conflict. Along with this, APT groups have been well known for conducting web defacements and DDoS attacks on Ukrainian websites, as well as releasing of destructive wiper malware to corrupt hardware systems of government IT assets, as well as industries. And this very much aligns with the initial assessment that was provided by the SANS Institute, where their assessment was that the attacks of Russian threat actors on Ukrainian infrastructure were very much focused on the disruptive elements, whilst deliberately keeping themselves in check to prevent a further escalation. In other words, it's a form of providing a hint of Russian capabilities, as well as providing enough attacks to essentially intimidate but not provoke any further attacks from retaliatory strikes back against the Russian infrastructure. And so while initial warnings of the cyber attack spillover did not fully materialize, we are seeing a lot of national security warnings and advisories warning of impending cyber attacks outside of Europe against commercial entities as well as government sites as well. And although this has been covered very lightly as a result of the actual attacks beyond Eastern Europe, it's important that our viewers understand that APT activity in Europe is a warning that similar activity may occur worldwide as well. And so again, along with this, we are seeing an upsurge in terms of hacktivism and non-state involvement. And this very much follows a shift in the spectrum of power from APT groups, which are of course formal state organizations or state-funded organizations, to decentralized hacktivist movements. And a simple reason for that is because cybersecurity is not just resigned to conventional military use. It is of course used in the civilian and commercial context, and therefore likewise spurs on more involvement. Along with this is the use of open source tools that are readily available on the internet to conduct a range of attacks from the uncomplicated and disruptive to the more concerning and sophisticated ones by the more technical adversaries. And along with the APT activity that I've mentioned earlier, these activist groups follow similar methods in the form of website defacements, DDoS attacks, and phishing and data exfiltration to ensure their presence is known, as well as to conduct what they believe to be significant damage on their key targets. And of course, Russia has borne the brunt of activist groups such as Anonymous, who have actually defaced Russian government websites, stolen confidential sensitive emails, and also leaked key data which were related to the conflict as well. And it's important for our viewers to know that the same attack vectors that are being used by these agents, regardless of their allegiance, may well be used against commercial entities later on for financial gain. And so website owners and key management in organizations can only benefit from remaining informed of the recent trends that have been happening on the Russia-Ukrainian front. For those methods may soon be employed in the near future in the commercial aspect as well. Here is a quick breakdown of the current activist groups that have been logged. As you can see, a large number of them are very much aligned with Ukraine, but there are also, most notably, quite a large number of them also have been aligned with being pro-Russia. And it's also one key trend to point out is that most of the pro-Russia groups are actually centered within Russia, whilst the international community has very much that are siding with Ukraine range from a number of locations, from Eastern European countries like Poland and Georgia, and to other countries like Belarus as well. And so it's still not exactly, most of these are actually unknown, and likewise will likely constitute the wider worldwide community. So along with this, the experiencing trends that have been happening as of the second quarter of this year, a lot of attacks, the context of cyber attack spillover is very much becoming a reality. We're seeing a lot of pro-Russian groups that are actually reaching out to attack fellow neighboring countries, as well as in countries in Europe, across a wide range of areas, from the Eurovision Song Contest back in May 15th, as well as Italian and German institutions. Latvia also has come under a cyber attacks, and as a result of multiple forums on Russian sites calling for hacktivist groups to actually launch their cyber attacks against Latvia. This has seen a mixed level of success. However, having said that, it is clear that the cyber community in Russia, whether it's both decentralized or spurred on by the state agenda, is still very much alive and now active in terms of directing the focus of the cyber capabilities overseas. And so along with this, of course, comes the issues of non-political groups such as corporations, where most notably we're seeing the Russian hacking attempts on SpaceX's Starlink, which is also an internet provider in the form of satellite communications. Key business figures that are such as Elon Musk have stepped out into the spotlight by openly providing aid, such as over 12,000 satellite dishes to Ukraine to keep internet accessible for both the Ukrainian military as well as the Ukrainian civilians. And so it's important that these that key management or CEOs may well be targeted as well for their involvement in this conflict, although they don't have a direct affiliation with either side. Along with this, international cyber authorities such as the NSA and FBI have issued a joint advisory regarding the increased malicious activity targeting managed service providers. And for our viewers, again, managed service providers are essentially IT service providers that often are third parties for companies providing a range of things from help desk activities, ticketing, as well as IT support. And so if these MSPs come under attack, it is likely that it will cause mass disruption of multiple customers and multiple companies that are reliant on their services. Lastly, we also have the issue of phishing and unauthorized email access for healthcare organizations. Now, the healthcare sector has always been targeted and well known to be targeted by malicious threat actors, hoping to either steal sensitive patient data or even holding them for ransom for financial gain. And so this continues to be a key issue, although it is less covered most recently and mostly overshadowed as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. One key aspect that I wish to bring up to our viewers today is the issue of Log4Shell. And although this has been heard back in 9th of December as of last year, this issue still remains a very well-known threat as a result of the number of servers that continue to remain publicly available and vulnerable on the internet. And for those who are our viewers who aren't so familiar with Log4Shell, the Log4Shell exploit actually allows threat actors to take over compromised web-facing servers by feeding them a malicious text string. And it exists within the Log4j, which is the Log4j utility, an open source Apache library for logging errors and events in Java-based applications. And this the utility is widespread across most web servers that are using Apache as their servers. And it was first discovered by the cloud security team of the Chinese e-commerce firm Alibaba. A number of attack services have actually been involved, as you could see in the slides earlier, which involved anything from Minecraft servers, LinkedIn social media, Apple iCloud, and even Tesla vehicles, as you can see in the screen here. And so direct action is therefore needed by companies because APT and hacktivist exploitations are highly probable once these servers become known. It's also important to note that quiet exploitations may well have been happened with much less publicity, as these backdoors are very valuable for hackers to actually exploit when and where they need to be, whether it's the form of ransomware attacks or even to actually exploit these companies for financial gain at the right place at the right time. So it's very possible that that Log4j exploits may be used by threat actors and then they remain dormant within a company's network, waiting for the right time to actually strike and again conduct the most amount of damage they possibly can. And new vectors are being discovered in the form of data lake and AI poisoning as a result of the Log4j vulnerability. And so it's appropriate for systems and software accounting to be essential for our website owners and for IT service providers. Security teams and system admins need to work together to identify where Log4j utility is being utilized, which systems use it, or at least have been in a dormant state, and patch them accordingly. Now, we're fortunately in a time where patches are available, and so therefore the hot fixes are much more accessible. It's important that these organizations do actually implement these software patches immediately. As we continue to progress into 2022, new perspectives, of course, have to be adopted. Vulnerabilities are continuing to grow, as well as but the attack surfaces are often the same. And what that means is essentially, as these new exploits become known, as these new viruses or even key threats become known to the public, often we have to look into the same attack vectors that are happening. In the case for Log4j, for example, outgoing firewall rules can prevent attackers from scanning for vulnerable servers or compromising the key web server data as well and preventing defacements. We also have experienced, as you can see as part of the graphic, a shift to cloud infrastructure, partly because of the costs that are involved. Cloud, of course, offers the benefits of scalability, low upkeep, as well as relative accessibility on the public internet. And this, of course, has also spurred on the proliferation of web applications and interfaces. All of these are attack surfaces that need to be guarded, as well as and essentially hardened against potential cyber attacks. And greater remote access needs also make sure that users on the public internet do not get exposed to corrupted VPN servers or even are engaged in man-in-the-middle attacks that may just well happen as a result. And so encryption is, of course, needed. And so although these multiple developments are happening in the IT landscape and new vulnerabilities are being found, again, the need to adopt effective cyber hygiene and resilience by companies are more important than actually the preventative aspects that have often held traditional implementations involved. This includes the reducing of the attack surfaces with proper access control. Locking down root accounts and limiting privileged access is essential to preventing the widespread damage from happening. Role-based access control can help to compartmentalize hijacked accounts in their domains. So, for example, if a finance account was ever compromised, the attack does not spread over to, say, the IT department, where confidential IT infrastructure or access to other sensitive data servers are ever accessed by the attacker. It's important that we're now in the time of intense system logging, and so inspecting and filtering of network traffic and ensuring that system events are logged and readable continue to be a common practice and are essentially enforced by the IT security teams. And so monitoring, again, is essential to understand the trends for investigations. And deploying this in the form of multiple layers helps to ensure that should a breach occur, further investigations can be done, or at least remediated on the fly. Along with this, of course, as mentioned before, organizations have to be increasingly prepared for the context of a ransomware attack. And this involves making sure that the main attack surfaces and attack vectors are mitigated as much as possible. And this involves the use of preventing malware insertion, ensuring that staff are better briefed against phishing attacks, which is also a common vector where ransomware can be inserted, as well as conducting a proper due diligence on the third-party vendors or MSPs that are actually maintaining your services should you outsource your IT requirements. And so the key narrative behind this, again, for our viewers, is to continuously practice incident response and business continuity, because prevention alone is not enough in this kind of era, where the response to cyber attacks in the event of an attack breach is just as important, or even not more important, than the actual preventative measures that are done to ensure these attacks don't even happen at all. And so this involves both a complex combination of both technical requirements followed by a human-centric approach, making sure that responses are done accordingly and as soon as remediations are implemented as quickly as possible. And this summarizes the threat insights that we have today. I'd like to thank you all for listening and wish you a pleasant day. Thank you.